so, James, yeah.
Are we back on?
Daisy will soon tell me if you can't find it on the YouTube channel.
Yeah. We're back.
Yeah, okay, Sean.
Thank you, Chair. Before the audio cut out, I just wanted to reflect on a point that a couple of our councillors have made about the transparency and the sort of audit type approach we've tried to take to this. Because there is a lot of collective experience in the room on major capital programmes at an officer level and at a member level. And whilst it's true that we can reflect on the current funding streams and look at the National Audit Office project, I think some of us have also been involved in other types of projects under previous administrations which were so exacting as the outcomes, they were also problematic. And what can be said about the funding that we have been allocated to Worcester is it's a truly transformational amount of funding for Worcester, delivered in quite an empowering way in terms of the MOU we signed up to. But we obviously recognise, and I think this is a really important point for us as a small district council, we're building our collective knowledge and our collective memory about the complexity of managing capital projects. And that goes back further. So the fact that we have these overarching programme objectives is learning taken from a previous audit we did about the demolition of the former swimming pool site, and reflecting on that and bringing that knowledge into this about those overarching programme objectives, which of course we can supplement with more detailed project objectives, which we will need to do for this particular venue. But the overall programme is already, as you know, delivering a transformational impact insofar as high street regeneration. So I think it's just that audit and learning point coupled with the council's commitment to be very transparent. We have very, very few items on exempt papers, as you know, and looking at the 18 audit questions, the National Audit Office framework, I guess as statutory officers, we were very satisfied and relieved to kind of check our own thought process around stopping and raising the flag when the cost escalation was forecast to be significant before we'd spent the funding or sought your approval to spend the funding under some sort of variation. And I just think as we go forward and as the council's budget pressure continues to be a prevailing feature of our conversations, just remembering that sort of set of governance behaviours, that we're very committed to transparency. We're trying to manage this within a framework that recognises that change will be necessary. And I know we've said in the report, and it is a feature of this project, that we sort of make public statements that suggest we are actually at project delivery stage when we're actually quite a long way back into feasibility still. And we had a similar experience with the Arches project, that there's been significant delay on the construction programme caused by dealing with Network Rail, Archco, COVID, nesting birds, water ingress and various other things. We've probably, the court of public opinion's been more forgiving on that because the sums are smaller, or probably people weren't so attentive to the detail until the arches were open. But I think there's an important point about the corporate memory for the council as it goes forward, that major capital programmes are very complex, risky, and sometimes divergent from where you start out. And I think that there's a collective responsibility on us to keep this sort of audit and risk management approach kind of forefront in our minds. And as officers, we were grateful of the intervention from members to actually take this as a team and look at this through the review process and bring things like the risk register back to the fore. But I think that we've got to kind of own that collectively as we go forward, whatever the nature of the project, because I think that the subtlety of all of that is very hard to translate into a short item, you know, in a news report or something. And I think inevitably we will encounter challenges like this on projects like this in the future. And I think that we just need to recognise that is just the nature of the project, irrespective of how the funding's been awarded or what the project is. And I think that that shouldn't be interpreted as a lack of ambition on the part of officers or members. It's quite the opposite. It's about a realistic and safe way of working. Thank you, Chair.
Sean, any other comment from the floor? Okay, so I'm going to move to the recommendations. David has run through them 1.1 to 1.4. With your agreement, I'm just going to take them as one show of hands. In agreement, please show. Thank you very much. Okay, moving on to agenda item 7, St Peter the Great, Warndon Parish Council review of electoral arrangements. Sean?
Thank you, Chair. This report invites the Policy and Resources Committee to consider the options for changing the ordinary year of election for our parish councils and make a referral to full council for the preferred option so that that can be converted into an order. The background for this, very briefly, as members will be aware, is that the consequence of the City Council resolving to change its electoral cycle from thirds to whole council elections is that, as things now stand, the parish council's ordinary electoral year will not be the same as the city council's. In other words, the parish council's electoral cycle will not fall within the same year as the city's. And there's an expectation in the legislation that it should, and also in financial terms, it's very onerous for the parish councils to be expected to administer effectively an all-out election for the parish council separately from district council elections. So members are aware that on that basis, the parish councils requested the city council undertake a governance review, which is what it's effectively called in the legislation. It's quite a light touch legal framework. We followed every aspect of it, but there's not particularly detailed guidance or many procedural steps to follow. We undertook a consultation process in the public domain, for which we received 27 consultation responses. The parish councils themselves also must be viewed as consultees, and it's very important that that point is taken into account. We've sought their views, and they have provided views as part of the consultation response. All of the consultation responses are replicated in the report. They've also provided responses directly to officers. We are in a position at the moment where Warndon Parish Council's preference is to hold an election next year and thereafter move to 2028. And St Peter the Great's preference is to move to 2028. What I wanted to advise you tonight is that both of those preferences can be accommodated under the same piece of legislation and the same order from the council. And that's because the legislation says, well, first of all, the legislation is ambiguous as to whether the city council could make an order which was different for two different parish councils. Arguably it can, according to this very brief drafting, but it's not necessary for us to do that, because instead the legislation says we can make transitional provision for the retirement of existing parish councillors at times different from those applying. So where I'm going with this is that if the committee are minded to recommend to full council that the preferred option is, in the future, the ordinary parish electoral year begins in 2028, the rest of that resolution and recommendation can be, but either parish council may resolve to call an election next year on the occasion of the retirement of councillors. So in other words, it's just a matter of fact that if councillors retire next year, that will trigger an election in the parish. So we can resolve that the ordinary electoral year going forwards will be 2028, and the order can recognise that there may be a transitional scenario where one or both of the parishes wishes to hold an election next year to deal with those who wish to retire. When I say election, I should be clear that if there are no contested seats, then an election won't be held. But if people actually want to retire, then it follows there will be contested seats. So I hope that's clear enough. Sorry, I mean, I appreciate it's quite a sort of niche area of law, but I think obviously there is information which we have to hand around the cost of elections, which I can share, turnout and so forth. I'm happy to take any questions, Chair.
Great, thanks very much. Adrian, and then Stephen.
Yes, thanks, Chair. I mean, I'm very clear. I fully understand what Sean says. It's not difficult. And I think it makes sense to crack on with things, and option 2 seems to be the easiest way to do that.
Stephen Hodge.
Yes, thank you very much for that clarification, Sean. I've got 1 or 2 questions from this. What you're therefore saying is the parish council elections in the city for the 2 parish councils will be effectively 2028 and every 4 years onwards to coincide with city council. It happens obviously in the transitional arrangement whereby a parish council may decide they want to go for 2024, which in the case of Warndon parishes that I am a member of, that is what members have wished to do. If that is the case, I take it our parish council would then have to have a vote, decide to go for an election in 2024. Is that correct? And would there be a deadline for us to have that vote? Does that mean if we have that vote, does that mean every single member of Warndon Parish Council is therefore up for re-election next year? Or is it possible that the members may say, well, actually, I want to stay on until 2028, and effectively we'd have some of the parish councils councillors standing for election and some of them don't, in which case then isn't it not just the same as just you know, resigning your seat and actually contesting election? Because I can certainly remember when Les Phillips, who was a parish councillor, stepped down for ill health. We, although it was about 7 months before the end of his term of office, some members of the public decided they would call a council by-election, which cost the parish council about £3,000 to actually hold, and only 17% of the parish electorate actually voted. So I do need those particular areas of clarification, because if those answers are not satisfactory, then I would say we should have options 1 for St Peter and option 2 for Warndon Villages.
Thank you, Councillor. The ability in the legislation to make a transitional arrangement says this order may include transitional provision for the retirement of existing parish councillors at times different from those otherwise applying. So retirement means to step down and not serve again is our collective understanding. So the effect of that would be the transitional arrangement would say, in the event of the retirement of councillors, an election may be held in 2024. And because the transitional arrangement would say that, it wouldn't require a parish council to vote on that, because the order would be effective. The order would say, in the event of retirement in 2024, an election will be held. So it wouldn't require, but it would be to fill those places effectively. So it wouldn't be a full election, it would be for those who choose to retire before May 2024.
Robin Norfolk.
Thank you, Chair. Back in 2019, when I became a member of Warndon Parish Council, I was lucky enough to attend a parish council forum at County Hall. The keynote speaker was the chair of the then County Council, who told us that parish councils were the bedrock of local democracy. And it's true, we are, or we were, we are, they are. It seems to me then, therefore fair, that option 2, applied to both parish councils, would be representative and more democratic than allowing either parish council to have different dates. I make my point.
I've got Eleanor and then Marjorie.
Thank you, Chair. Obviously, I represent St Peter's Ward, and I just feel that option 2 is better, because this council, as city councillors, we've had to alter our election cycle, and some of us who were only elected in May are actually going to be go up for election again next year. So we've only been elected for 1 year. So it makes sense to me, we're trying to cut costs. It just makes sense that we should bring everybody all in line together. So I think that the parish council should be having their election next year and then follow on the same as the city council. So my preference, and also it's the perception of democracy to local residents, so they can be involved in the decision-making process. It doesn't sit right with me that parish councils are not going to have an election for a number of years, so I think that they should fall in line with the city council. So I prefer option 2.
Well, I was going to make very similar arguments for option 2 as well. I also think that next year, when we have all our elections for the City Council, it's going to be quite a big event. And I think it's reasonable to expect that more people will vote in the parish council elections next year if everybody in the city is already busy voting for the City Council. And of course, that will continue as we go forward.
Okay, thank you. Steve Cochrane.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, City Councillor for St Peters as well, but I would speak to kind of both the issues of both parishes. I think just the general principle really, or that anything that would reduce sort of democratic choice just flies in the face of my values, and I think the values of a a public organisation. So my preference would be for option 2, which may be moot in the sense that if there is no contest, then there wouldn't be a vote anyway. But it makes sense to me that we shouldn't reduce democratic choice where that that is an option.
Further questions or comment? Please do, yes.
Just on an administrative point, I think we all understand each other. The idea of having the option of a transitional arrangement to allow for retirement for those who wish to step down only relates to option 1. It isn't necessary if on the vote tonight we're proceeding with option 2, because then that will just be the ordinary electoral cycle next year and then 4 years after. I think you'd all, but I just wanted to check. Yeah.
Would it be appropriate to just seek agreement option by option on this one, is that?
Yes. Yes, Chair, we can take the first option. If that is supported by a majority, then that's the option that's selected.
Okay.
I think that's okay, isn't it?
Yeah. Adrian.
I move option 2.
Can I just make a small point?
Yeah.
We can choose different options for the different parish councils, if I understand you right, Sean.
Thank you, Councillor. I think the legislation is ambiguous. I think it is not precluded, but it is such a brief provision. It is hard to rule on that definitively. I don't see the grounds for a judicial review if we did that. I think it's becomes a very local quirk then, and harder to explain, arguably, which is why I was suggesting if there was a majority preference for the later date to accommodate St Peter's, then the earlier date can be brought in with the if people retire provision. That's why my head had gone there. I can't advise it's unlawful because of the way it's written is so open. It could be acceptable. And I don't expect there's many people in the country who would proclaim to be an expert on the interpretation of section 53 subsection 2. So I would be comfortable to advise it's acceptable to do that. I wouldn't recommend it in terms of the interests of good administration. I think it's confusing for residents.
I think I agree with Sean, but on that point, but should we make a decision as a committee that we are going to adopt a uniform approach, Chair? That's the point I was trying to get to.
I would personally tremble at the thought of a committee that I chair having any more ambiguity at the end of this discussion than we had at the beginning of it. So I think, from my perspective, I urge clarity. So that So let's go back to the rundown, essentially. Anyone in favour of option 1, please show. Option 2. I think that deals with that one. Yeah. I think, yes, beg your pardon, yeah, that does, for the purposes of the tape, that is unanimous in favour of option 2. Thank you. Okay, thank you. Right, moving on. Agenda item 8, Q2 Financial Monitoring Report. Mark.
Thank you, Chair. This report takes us up to the end of September, the second quarter of the year, and contains the year-end forecast for the revenue budget at that point in time. And if I refer you to paragraph 3.1, that explains that that forecast is now for a surplus of £380,000. We need to just clarify what surplus means here. If you cast your mind back to the point in time in February when we set the budget, that balanced budget was achieved through a significant drawing from reserves. So the surplus of 380 simply means that rather than generating a true surplus, we're therefore forecasting a reduced take from those reserves. The budget originally included repurposing 578,000 of existing earmarked reserves, and then an additional transfer of 329,000 from the business rates risk reserve over to the revenue budget. This forecast now still includes the repurposing of the earmarked reserves, but recognises that we will no longer need to make the 329,000 transfer from the risk reserve, which is obviously good news. Paragraph 3.2 then goes on to note that this improved position has partly been achieved through the fact that the savings plan, which we've talked about at several of these meetings, which is mainly focused on the budget for next year, is already starting to achieve some of those savings in the current year. And so the positive point here is that just over £1 million worth of savings are now appearing in this year, and they're helping contribute to the surplus I've already talked about. At that point, if I refer you to Appendix 1, we can then run through this in a little bit more detail. I'll just give you time to find that. So this should be the table that's described as the year-end revenue budget forecast variance. We've got 3 columns: the position at Q1, which was the surplus of 188, the updated position at Q2, which is the 380 that I've talked about, and then the difference between the two, so the reasons why that improvement has occurred. And you can see in the middle of the table there on the salaries and the interest receivable lines, the improvements on the salaries. That's particularly because of the voluntary redundancy programme and other vacancies that have been identified for being removed as part of the savings plan. In the interest receivable, the fact that interest rates continue to increase, the council's fortunate that the borrowing interest rates are fixed. But any surplus cash that we place on deposit, we then receive a higher interest on. So those are the positives, and a few underneath the business rates refund on car parks and the lower fuel costs, etc. But those improvements are offset by the figures at the top, wherein housing benefit subsidy and some of the income lines, we are falling short of the budget. And then at the bottom, we've got the 329, where, as I've said, we'll no longer need to take that from the risk reserve. So those overall add up to the improvement of 192, which takes us from the position at Q1 to the position at Q2. In terms of the report itself, I don't propose to take you through all the detail. It essentially sets out what we've run through in that table. But if I take you down to paragraph 8.1, I think it is, which is the collection of business rates and council tax. The sums here are obviously significant for the council, so it's an important measure for us to keep sight of. And And it's just a note of caution here that the collection rates are slightly behind the budget, the target, which is based on those in previous years, mainly the pre-pandemic figures. In council tax, we've slipped slightly behind the Q1 figure. For business rates, it's consistent. The quantum of those figures isn't serious, clearly, but it's certainly one for us to keep an eye on. Any income there that isn't collected in the current year can still be collected in subsequent years as arrears, but obviously as time moves on, that becomes slightly more difficult. And paragraph 8.2 just covers the write-offs that have been made during the quarter. Nothing significant there, but as I've said many a time in these meetings, timing of write-offs doesn't necessarily reflect the collection rate at the time. Obviously, write-off is a last resort. And as I think paragraph 8.3 notes, most of the write-offs taken account of through liquidation and insolvencies. I think at that point, Chair, I'm then happy to take any questions.
Mark, thank you. Any questions or comment, please? I'm seeing none. So,
sorry, in a report of this scale, cannot go without comment. It's really important, and there's a huge amount of work in every sense gone into this. Now, our budget position as a council is challenging, as it is for many local authorities, some considerably more than others. And I guess we're all kind of hanging on what the Chancellor does or doesn't choose to give us tomorrow will be absolutely critical in terms of our ability to set a budget and next year and what we can aspire to do next year, or whether we've got more difficult decisions ahead of us. So thank you to officers for the work that has gone into this and for doing your best to manage our budget within difficult circumstances. You know, it's quite notable in several parts of the report, you know, this is a volatile area. The economy is in a volatile place. The cost of energy is in arguably national government politics is in a volatile place, but we still have to deliver for our citizens. We're in a better place at this point in the year than we had feared at the beginning of the year. And I think, you know, having the budget deficit as a key part of the performance report, which we'll come to, is important in focusing minds. The cost of IT licenses, giving more money to Microsoft, that was a new one. So an extra 70k for what is, you know, an essential operational service that just, yeah, somehow we have to find that and meet that in order to ensure that we have the appropriate software to manage things. It's pleasing to see that people are coming into the city centre more regularly, and that the increase in car park charges doesn't appear to have put them off. You know, that's an important measure that has a significant impact. I think those are probably the key highlight. I mean, the other one that I'm kind of pleased to see is income from the electric vehicle charging points. You know, there are more about to go in, and it absolutely illustrates not only are they an important resource for our residents and in terms of carbon reduction, but actually, you know, makes a useful financial contribution to the council finances, and I presume that is only, that will increase in future. So it's good to see that there and a positive contribution. So thank you for all the work that's gone into it. I think, as we said previously, though, challenges still lie ahead. Thank you.
You, Eleanor.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, the report is absolutely excellent. In challenging times that we're facing, it's great to see that officers have done such a tremendous job with regards to the finances. I'm really pleased to see that the fee income from the car parking charges has actually increased, and that residents haven't been, and visitors to the city haven't been put off by the increase to the car park charges. I think that was quite a bit of a leap of faith that had to be done, and I think it's actually paid off. And it's also great to see that the income from the trade waste collections is actually exceeding all expectations. So I'm really pleased about that. Just will have one query though about the software in terms of the collection for council tax. You're talking in the report about next autumn the software is going to be in place. Can I just have some clarification on that, if that's possible? Gosh, I think it's the bit under where we're talking about the collection. I think it's been on hold temporarily, waiting for the software update. I'll just try and find it.
Through you, Chair. 4.8.6. Yeah. So the income from court fees is below forecast. Through you, Chair. The 18 months ago, we took our revenues and benefits management service back in-house, and at the same time transferred the system from the Capita system to the Civica system. And that was a lengthy and complex process, which resulted in a number of data issues, which have taken a long time to resolve. At the same time, we, through our own decisions, suspended our recovery of council prior year debt because of COVID in first instance, and then because of the cost of living crisis. So as a way of helping people to meet those challenges. So we are now, having got over all of those data processing issues and moved forward in terms of the economic circumstances, are reintroducing the regular routine process of debt collection, which we would normally have in place. So that is now just coming back into force. So there's a backlog of work to recover, and they're doing a lot of work on recovering that, and we'll see from the performance report later how they've made significant improvements in terms of processing benefits and council tax subsidy as well. So we're now getting back into a position where we should start to go through that kind of routine of issuing the bills, reminder letters, reminder letters and notices, and then court procedures which follow on from that. So that's what that's referring to.
Thank you. Karen Lewin.
Thank you, Chair. I think also I've really found the detail put on the report really helpful to understand it. But one thing that stood out to me is the increased cost of temporary accommodation. The cost of a temporary accommodation. It's a really sad, it's the sadness behind some of these finances that has hit me really. I know this is something that the other committees are dealing with, and it's the reflection that in the future, I mean, I can't see this improving unless there's something really addressing the cost of living crisis. And I'm just wondering whether that means that in the future quarters, we're actually just going to have to, face a big reality check that this might still be increasing. Thank you.
Through you, Chair, if that's the case, this is an ongoing issue. I mean, we've taken a number of strategies to try and increase the amount of affordable housing that's available, which should drive down that change, but that's a long process and it will take some time. And in fact, we will be thinking in the forthcoming budget about making a better allowance for that, recognising there is going to be a loss. We've always taken a position that it should be recoverable and we should be able to reduce it. But it's become systemic, and I think we're reaching the point where we're saying we have to accept that we need to budget for that loss.
My apologies, Pat, if I missed you earlier.
Thank you, Chair. I was looking in the round at this and I thought, well, we're being helped by things over which we have no control. Obviously, interest rates have been favourable to us, despite the fact that the supply side of our services is obviously costing us a lot more in various areas. But I'd just like to highlight the property rentals, which is 5% up, which is excellent. I mean, Kevin has obviously done a very good job, but I do remember us, Shane, we buying two buildings, King's Court and a neighbouring building, and those have served us well because they had reliable sitting tenants and we were very prudent about those purchases. So there's some councils just sort of bought everything in sight, you know, and caused problems for all the rest of us, but they've actually done well for us. And I'm very pleased that we managed to do that. And I trusted your advice on that. You're absolutely right. Well done, you know.
Through you, Chair, so far, we can actually just pick out the figures of that on the performance report that comes along in a minute. So Mark could say a bit more about how income has changed on that.
Okay, agenda item 9, corporate risk management report. Shane.
Thank you, Chair. This is first of the two reports we do on our update on our risk register at this time of year. Sorry, not this time of year. We do one this time of year. We do one at the end of the year. In this case, we've taken the opportunity just to review them a little bit and see where we are in terms of the overall register, and concluded that there was quite a bit of duplication, a number of things which are now sort of business as usual. So there's a list there below paragraph 3.3, a table which shows 8 risks in the register which we think that we can delete or merge with other ones. The rationale for those is set out in the table, and I won't go through that, but it is suffice to say in most cases we think they're duplications and they can be addressed under other risks. One risk we're bringing back in under paragraph 3.4, which was lone working, that developed during COVID, and then when we came out the other end of that, we removed that from the risk register. But because of the various changes in staff levels and the greater move to flexible working, we think we should continue to keep an eye on. And then 3, which have just had their titles amended just to make them a bit clearer. So of the ones that are on the risk, in fact, across the risk register as it stands, but all 3 of these are remaining that are red. So the 2 which relate to finances, local government funding and our financial resources remain red for the time being, although we've made huge inroads, as members have noted, in reducing that budget gap. It's still there, and we still have more work to do, so that's something we need to keep in view. And the 3rd red one is ICT security, and although that's something again that we've made a lot of work in trying to address and bring under control, there are still elements of that which need to be considered. The materiality side of that risk is still very high. The frequency has been reduced somewhat because we think we're in a better position than we were, but touch wood, that's something that is still needs to be considered as a high priority. So it remains for the time being a red risk. So if there are any questions on that, I'm happy to answer them, Chair.
Questions, Karen?
Thank you, Chair. I've just got a suggestion for the CRK 008 civil emergency. You talk about a major civil emergency of flooding. I wonder whether we could make this more about extremes in weather. So then it would take in account of extreme cold and extreme heat with climate change. If that's okay. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, happy to do that. Yeah.
Robin.
Thank you, Chair. I understand the reasons for removing or merging CRK 007, the business rates retention, risk of large employer leaving the city, in with the city plan priorities, financial resources. I am concerned that the impact to the city of large employers leaving the city is far wider than the loss of business rates. I just wonder if we should actually retain this as a visible risk.
Through you, Chair. Well, I mean, the rationale for doing it is that when I report on them every quarter, I found myself never reporting on the losses of individual businesses, which is what the risk was about. So it happens from time to time, but when it happens, and it's not really a risk that we can seem to mitigate in any way. If local businesses are lost, then that's something which we have to respond to, rather than proactively addressing as much as we can in terms of supporting local businesses and engaging with them and keeping them going. So I was regularly reporting within that risk about the business rates overall and you know what the overall impact was, which was part of the discussion about what our overall financial position was. So it seemed almost a bit pointless, you know, if I put it that in those terms, to focus on that particular aspect, as it was simply much more likely to be a risk around the wider business rates retention rather than the individual businesses leaving the city. So I think, you know, there might be another approach to that question in terms of the risk of organisations leaving the city, but the impact on our business rates isn't the greatest element of that. Its impact in terms of jobs, social, you know, effects and so on. You know, it might be worth reconfiguring it so we're talking about those elements and the impact that has rather than on the business rates impact.
If I may, Chair, I mean, I kind of agree with that as an approach, reconfiguring the risk.
Good, thank you. Adrian. Pat. No, please,
One is, with regard to the development plan, things are moving fairly fast. It says here that you know, we've submitted it, which we have, and we do have a government inspector and a deputy appointed already, and we do know the inspector of old, and I know that Duncan knows him quite well. So he's reputedly a fast worker, and at the moment he's living up to his speedy reputation. You know, we're expecting his first tranche of questions any time now. So things are moving along as we expected. So it's, you know, we're on target at the moment. And the second thing, sorry.
Sorry, go on.
Yes. Do we have any ideas about, oh no, forget it. I'll talk about that on another item. Sorry, that'll be fine.
Okay. Any other further questions or comments? None that I'm seeing. Okay. So the recommendation merely asks that we note the updated assessment at the end of Q2 and the revised corporate risk register. Happy to do so. Okay. Thank you. To agenda item 10, Q2 performance report 23-24. And Shane again.
Thank you, Chair. This is again, it's a regular report. These are quarterly, these ones. Just a slight correction. So in the summary, under the city plan projects and actions, where we've got city centre transport strategy is showing green, that's because the project was to actually just deliver the strategy. So it got to that point, but clearly there's an awful lot that follows on from that. So what the text says, and that shows this is a red risk rather than a green, hence the correction, is that we need to, what we're asking is to transfer that now on to PED committee as something to keep an ongoing watch on and continue that discussion. So it remains on the scorecard. It doesn't disappear off completely simply because we've written the strategy. And then secondly, in terms of the actions, the energy saving capital investment project. So there's a lot of work that's been going on with that now. It had got a target date of July 2023, but clearly that's going to take some time to put the solar panels on the leisure centre, etc., etc. So I'm asking for that date to be put back to December 2024, which then we will show we can continue to work on that project as it goes forward. In terms of the PIs, the mandatory training by officers is one that we've introduced because we just want to throw focus on the fact that we need to be skilling everybody up on certain things, particularly around data management. And a lot of work has been done on that. We've moved from the sort of 60% through to the 80% and continue to try that, move that forward. The others, voluntary leaver rate and traineeships are close to target, but not quite where we would like them to be. And in terms of customer satisfaction, you'll be aware that our annual survey is now out with circulation. So fill it in, give us your views and increase the satisfaction rates as we go. And then finally, we had two local government ombudsman complaints which were held, but I don't think they resulted in major significant change. There were some changes to systems, but they were not material. Any questions? Yeah.
Thank you, Shane. Karen, and then Robin.
Thank you very much. I just want to make a comment on the number of days to process new housing benefit claims. I remember seeing this at the high level it was before. I'm really pleased to see this downward trajectory and that the current value is way below our target. And I am actually going to suggest that you should have a lower target. Thank you. Because obviously it's the benefit to our citizens, and if we can do it, why can't we do it consistently? Thank you.
Thank you. Robin, and then Lynn.
Thank you, Chair. And again, regarding the city centre transport strategy, I'm obviously looking forward to seeing that come through to PED. And there's obviously a bit of detail in behind here, you know, because there are two parties that have a role in the city in delivering the city centre transport strategy, county and the city. And it is, of course, such a long strategy as well, 10 years if memory serves me properly. So yeah, I'd be much more interested in looking at the detail of that. Thank you.
Okay.
Just on that one, Chair, that there may be opportunities to break that down into smaller components when we do it at the PED committee. Hence, perhaps it's better there than in policy and resources.
Thank you. Yes, and I was also going to say, you know, well done. Really pleased to see the housing benefit improvement, and that is by bringing the service back in-house. And it is really important. It is really important to our customers, to the people waiting for the money as a result of those claims. So it is a really important measure. It's not just a graph. You know, it is people waiting on and people struggling until that check or that agreement comes through. So well done. And you know, behind a number of these graphs, there is an awful lot of hard work. It's easy just to see a data point, but it is, you know, service delivery, officer time. So yeah, thank you.
Please do. Yes.
Sorry, Jim, just to comment on that again, one of the features of bringing it back in-house is that we now can change the target, whereas before it was set in the contract. We have now control over that we didn't have.
Pat Agar, and then Marjorie.
Thank you. I was looking at page 112 and the training section. I was very pleased to see that there was an item on personal safety included in there, because I really do think we need to look after our staff. And as we move to a leaner machine here, there are going to be more staff who are working alone. And especially frontline staff, I think, do need to be protected and to know that they are, to know what to do in trying circumstances or dangerous circumstances. And I think that's true of all of us too as members. We do interact with the public a great deal, and I think we do need to be much more mindful than we often have been in the past of our own safety, especially when we're working on our own. Because I mean, I used to work in the community sector. I was the manager of a women's centre for 8 years. And so I often had to walk into places where I knew there was violence in the home. And I only ever did that with a plainclothes police officer, and I wouldn't let my staff go into it. So, you know, we do walk into people's homes, and I think we should be aware that we are taking a risk even when we think we know someone. And that we should take reasonable precautions whenever we do that. And we've had, obviously, across the nation, we have had politicians attacked on a variety of levels, physically and verbally. And I'd like to think that we were all very savvy about that and that we looked after ourselves and our colleagues.
Sian.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I just want to respond to the comments from Councillor Agar, and absolutely recognise the importance of personal safety and what a changing and dynamic issue it can be. Some members will recall that we commissioned some face-to-face training for councillors on personal safety, and we recognise that that was the start of a sort of conversation as opposed to the end of a sort of training brief. It led to questions. It opened up things we hadn't thought of. We've done work with our risk assessments, loan working, and so forth. We would want to run that training again for councillors. In the meantime, it's supplemented by some of the online modules that we do circulate to you. The LGA do some good ones on personal safety. In relation to staff, we always have done personal safety training. Similarly, in the post-COVID environment, when looking at our accident reports, we were seeing a marked escalation in verbal abuse. We put on personal safety training. We used the same firm that came in to train councillors, and a very large cohort of staff whose roles put them in operational contact with customers were trained. So I want to reassure you that a whole cohort of staff were identified for a whole day training event, which they took part in to supplement the core offer that all staff get. But there are other measures we're doing to improve our loan working, obviously which overlaps with personal safety. And there are some initiatives underway, and in fact the JCSE committee every quarter receive a health and safety report, and loan working and personal safety is within that report. So very much recognised, and it's an ongoing activity area, and it won't stop anytime soon.
Thank you. Through you, Chair, I just wanted to add a piece of information with regards to the payments processes. So we've been informed that from the 5th of February next year, all residents that are currently in receipt of tax credits will be transferring over to universal, what's the word I'm looking for? Universal credit, another credit. So, you know, there are various tax credits available at the moment, working tax credit, child tax credit, the list goes on. And so I've been speaking with Lloyd and Shane, and there are around 135 people that have been identified through our systems that are impacted by this. There is an assurance that there will be, I think for want of a better word, transitional protection for people moving over to the new system, but just so that members are aware that process will commence the 5th of February 2024. And we're hoping very much that that won't cause any problems for anybody, but we're on it, if I can put it that way. We're aware of the concerns. Thank you, Chair.
David, thank you for that. So, as I'm not seeing any, Marjorie, sorry, I beg your pardon.
That's okay. I just wanted to congratulate officers on their their call answer rates and responsiveness. They're absolutely first class. And it's so important because it's very often somebody's first contact with the council.
Thank you very much. Okay, to the recommendation, are we happy to note? Thank you very much indeed. So to agenda item 11, setting of the budget. Mark?
Thank you, Chair. This report follows the same approach that we've taken in previous years to the budget setting. It sets, reminds members of the budget that was set last February, including those elements that are pertinent, relevant to this committee, and then invites members to think of suggestions, proposals they may wish to make in the January budget committee meetings as part of setting the budget that will go forward then to this committee in February and on to full council for approval. We have the next meeting of this committee in December, the draft budget, which members will then be able to review and scrutinise before we have the January meetings. If any members have any specific points to raise, then happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Mark. Any questions or comment, please? None that I'm seeing. Okay. In which case, are we happy to note the contents of the paper? Thank you. Thank you, Mark. And to agenda item 12, use of Managing Director's urgency powers.
Thank you, Chair. This is another seasonal report. As the process for agreeing the arrangements for the pooling of business rates across Worcestershire and Herefordshire runs outside of our cycle, we invariably have to agree this and then come to committee to present the fact that we have agreed it. We continue to get advantage from it, and as we go, things become more and more secure. So, for instance, right at the very last paragraph, there's a comment there that our business rates would need to fall by an average across the districts of 18.5%, which is massive. I think that's very, very unlikely to happen, which makes me in a much more solid position. And that certainly was earlier, that was lower in earlier years. And that is to do with the amount of growth that we get year on year within the pool. As long as the businesses here remain and new ones come along, business rates grow up and that growth agrees. However, the government has always committed to resetting the business rates at some point. It keeps putting it off year after year, and currently it's standing at 25, 26, something like that. If they were to do that, we'd lose all of that gain. And that, so that is why we have a reserve, a business rate risk reserve of 1.4 million, because that's just 10% of total business rates. And they could lose that at a stroke if the government decided to do it. That's why we keep that reserve. So sometimes we look at that and say, well, why have we got this huge reserve sitting there? It's quite simply because a simple change in government policy and we could lose that gain very quickly. So just wanted to highlight that point. The pool continues to be a great benefit to us, and all Section 151 officers across the council are committed to it. I think it's the right thing to do.
Adrian.
I discovered this thing existed in my consciousness, Chair, when I was leader of the council about 10 years ago. And it was something which all the districts were involved in, and the 2 county councils. And since then, I think it's been agreed annually on the basis of urgency powers. And it may have been doing that even before then. I just wondered, given that we're all local authorities and we all, why are we the ones who have to do it on urgency powers every time? Isn't it time another council fixed the arrangement of the timing of it so that they had to do it with urgency powers, but we could do it through a proper process?
Yeah, through you, Chair. If members of the committee want to delegate this function to me every year without reference to the committee, then I'm happy to do it. You're in safe hands.
David?
I'm happy to exercise my powers of urgency on occasion.
Okay, I've got Pat Agar.
Thank you, Chair. I still get a shiver down my spine when I remember the problems we had. We took a hit of £1.5 million, I think it was, when we were suddenly subject to a piece of case law that said that doctors' surgeries that were purpose-built and new did not have to pay the business rate. And I shudder to think what would happen this year if it happened to us this year. So if you want to know why that pool of money is there that Sean has just mentioned, that's one of the reasons why. You know, we can take a sudden hit without even knowing it's coming. But being part of the business pool certainly gave us a lot of resilience, and we were able to withstand that hit. So yeah, it's important.
Just on the question of shivers running down your spine, Mark and I received an email earlier in the week saying that one of our RVs had been evaluated and that there would be a hit on our pool of £3 million. About 10 minutes later, we got an email saying, "Oh, sorry, 300,000." So I'm still wondering if he did it on purpose, so it wouldn't sound so big, you know. It does illustrate the point, you know. At a stroke, £300,000 lopped off our business rates, just like that.
Definitely. Karen Lawrence.
Thank you, Chair. I wonder, have we got any implications from the RAC that's coming out? Some businesses may have RAC within the city, and those might be commercial premises, and they may get allowed to not pay business rates because they can't use their premises. If they're rented premises or anything, is there any risk with that we're aware of?
Through you, Chair, I'm not aware of it as a risk. I know that there's exercises being undertaken to try and identify buildings which have RAC. Yes, up from County Hall, yes.
And then to review libraries in other county services.
Yes, some of their areas, but apart from that, yes.
Okay, any further questions or comment? No. So to the recommendation, 1.1, we note the contents of the report, and 1.2, delegate to the corporate director authority to finalise arrangements for the pool in consultation with the chair and vice chairs of this committee. Those in favour, please show. Thank you very much. I'm not conscious of any AOB that exists, so on that note, I'll bid you all a very good evening. Thanks very much indeed.
Thank you. That's my minute. I'm going to say